Welcome to The Landscape, a podcast to shed light on the people, programs, and businesses that are changing the landscape for individuals with any type of disability. I'm your host, Nave Eldar. Today's episode will feature Debbie Becker, a senior research associate with individual placement support, which is the gold standard research-based method of support employment for individuals with serious mental illness. The method also ripples beyond service providers, as they are a model for the power of local and international collaboration. We start with Debbie speaking about how they decided to research employment.
Actually, our team had been researching other topics. Bob Drake, who is our leader and was our leader at the Dartmouth Psychiatric Research Center, was very interested in dual diagnosis, and so had been working in that area with his research. But then he was asked to collaborate on a research grant with Bill Anthony, actually, from Boston University. And Bill wanted to research a program in New Hampshire that did something close to what they do, the Choose, Get, Keep. And so Bob knew me from working at our local mental health center together. And so he actually recruited me to help with this grant, and we developed IPS for that grant, is what happened. IPS, as you know, stands for Individual Placement and Support. So it was a randomized controlled trial where IPS was compared to this other model. And so Bob has always been interested in services for people with serious mental illness. So, of course, employment was one of those areas. And so he wanted to do it. And it just became the focus of my career, but also in large part our center.
So can you explain very briefly what is randomized trials and why they're important?
Yeah, okay. So a randomized controlled trial is used to test 2 or 3 different interventions to see which one is most effective. And so when we did, they sometimes call them RCTs for short, a randomized controlled trial for employment, we would go into a mental health center and ask people, clients being served, would you be interested in being part of a study to learn which 2 employment interventions which one is more effective? And so it's like a flip of a coin. People who say, yes, I want to be part of this study. I understand intervention A. I understand intervention B. I will sign up. And so by a flip of the coin, they would get one of the 2 interventions, which they would then participate in. And then all things being equal, we would see which intervention had better employment outcomes.
Right. And so what were the findings year 1? Which would have been 1996, correct?
Yeah. So we don't look at the findings till the end of the study.
Okay.
So it's a 3-year study, and IPS had many more people go to work than the other intervention. And that's really been replicated now in 26 of 27 studies worldwide. The only one that was not that was borderline significant, meaning borderline close to being significantly different, was in mainland China. But otherwise, IPS has been studied in these RCTs around the world.
And so what are some of the elements that make IPS different from these other methods?
Okay, so traditional employment services were more stepwise. The thinking was we need to help people prepare for going to work. So that might be in a sheltered workshop where they would practice going to work on time and staying on task. They might be asked to go to be on a work crew after that out in the community, or they might be asked to volunteer to show that they can be successful working. But IPS, individual placement and support, took a different tack that people didn't really need that. what was important was to understand who the individual is, what their skills are, what they've done in the past, what do they want to do, and try to figure out where that is out there in the work world. And so people didn't drop out of these, IPS. They wanted to stay in. They wanted to get work. They didn't want to have it postponed while they were supposed to do vocational assessments, vocational evaluations. And I think that's what's helped to make it successful, is because we're honoring what people want. They want to go to work. And we're listening to what they want to do. So people's preferences are extremely important for the type of work, the kinds of job supports that they have. And so I think, that is a huge difference. Another big difference is that it's really a team approach. And so the IPS specialists, they connect with the mental health treatment team. And so they're part of the team, and they plan together, and they propose ideas to suggest to the individual about going to work. They know that what their skills are, and previously it really they were not integrated services. The thinking was that employment services are better separate, but that didn't turn out to be the case.
It's interesting because so you have it's a Fidelity model. But you also, on top of the Fidelity, you have 8 principles. And I was reading over those to refresh my memory. And I picked the 2 that you named, because I said if there were 2 game changers from what I saw that just really challenged people's, really everything that had ever been taught, one was zero exclusion. Mm-hmm. Because as you know, as soon as you say it, people look at you like you're just doing the wrong thing. And so can you talk a little bit about zero exclusion, and was that implemented from the very beginning?
It was. We started, I think, with 6 principles. We now have 8. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the 6. And the idea is that we're not going to screen people out who've had problems with the justice system, people who are using alcohol and drugs. That's a big one for mm-hmm. A lot of clinicians and other agencies. They don't think people should be able to use these services and go to work successfully. But the thing is that people need a reason to not use, right? And right. So work becomes, a motivator for people to not use as much, or to figure out when they're going to use and not have it interfere with work. So the zero exclusion is a tough one for a lot of people, a lot of clinicians, because they think they can predict who's going to go to work and who's not going to go to work. And I can remember being a project director for several of these studies, and I would go and tell the consumers about the possible study, and then clinicians would hear that they were randomly assigned to IPS, and they'd say, "Oh, it's never going to work. John's not going to go to work." And guess who was the first one to go to work with IPS? It was John.
John, right. Yeah. Exactly. It was a huge challenge for our vocational rehabilitation, because they had a policy that if somebody was recently released from the hospital, or if somebody was actively drinking, for example, that they would not serve them. And so IPS became their only letter of agreement, which is what we call it here in Tennessee. I don't know if it's called that everywhere, that allows for those individuals to be admitted. Like, you cannot turn anybody down. Mm-hmm. And I will say, whenever I'm around VR counselors in a meeting and IPS comes up, they cheer, because mm-hmm. They have such good outcomes from it. I know you kind of downplayed it a little, but you in some cases you doubled and tripled the outcomes of people who are going to work.
Right. Absolutely. And today there are still people in state vocational rehabilitation who haven't been exposed a lot to IPS and still question whether this makes sense. But how it comes to make sense is that they see that IPS is going to help them get their better outcomes
Right.
and see people doing better.
Hmm.
But it's a shift in thinking, really.
It is. And we there was a therapist on a team, and she became one of the biggest cheerleaders because she thought we were absolutely going to be a train wreck, right? Like this person's going to go to work, or these individuals are going to go to work that aren't quote unquote stable, um, and they're going to lose their job. And it took, one or two successes for her to realize, oh my gosh, the research is correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also I think it's worth mentioning that people tend to go through two or three different jobs before they may settle into one. And so, we can't expect that people, as we all did, right,
Right.
as in our work careers, that, the people may end up going through a couple different jobs before they really figure out what's the right one for them.
Hmm. And is it just the percentage of people that found a job that increased, or were there other data points that increased, like hours worked or income or anything like that?
Well, because more people went to work,
Hmm.
those data points increased as well. But there were fewer dropouts in IPS programs compared to the other interventions that have been studied, and that they work more hours, earn more money, and they're more satisfied.
So one of the reasons, like if you're reading about it, is this concept of recovery from mental illness. And so people that don't work in the field have no idea what that means. So can you speak a little bit about what is recovery from mental illness?
Yeah. So recovery doesn't mean that all symptoms are necessarily going to cease, but it's really that people are going to go past that in their lives, and they're going to have functional lives, and they're going to have a work life, or they are going to live more independently than they have in the past. So the focus is not on the disability and what are the barriers, but it's going forward and having a life. And having a life for most people includes having some kind of meaningful employment, and it may be going to school as well to have a career advancement, but and living independently, and having some kind of social network that's important to them. And so um, I think IPS really has been successful around because of the timing. And it was at the time that sort of strengths-based services Charlie Rapp started writing about, and the recovery movement, in which people with a lived experience said, we want more, and we want to make decisions, and we don't want the practitioners telling us what to do.
Imagine that.
Mhm.
um, and one of the things that I was drawn to IPS for immediately was the fact that it was research based. Because, like you said, our intuition with the disability community has been pretty terrible when you think about it. Like we think they can't, or they should be in, like you said, enclaves or mobile work crews or things like that. And very little has been done to take what they wanted into consideration, and then to see, are we right or are we wrong? And so that's the beauty of research, and
Right.
it's just lacking. Is there any other populations that you're looking at besides individuals with severe and persistent mental illness?
Oh, yes. IPS is spreading to lots of different populations, even people with physical disabilities. So, people with spinal cord injuries, and this is being studied in the Veterans Administration. But also in Europe, they're studying people with common mental disorders, and so um, they're they're studying IPS with refugees, and so people with intellectual disabilities, autism spectrum disorder. So there's really been a spread over many different populations, and vocation. You mentioned state vocational rehabilitation. That's occurring in a number of states. In Illinois, for example, is spreading IPS very widely across different populations.
Interesting. I know here in Tennessee, we are piloting some programs with the dual diagnosis of an intellectual and developmental disability with a mental illness. And so that's something where it's it's a population that is often doesn't have specialized services for them. Like they want to give them one or the other. So we're very excited just to see what the outcomes will be for that.
Yeah. I think what makes that easily applied to different populations is that IPS is a very practical approach and it's very individualized. So if you look at the Fidelity scale, we have a 25-item Fidelity scale, and they'll talk about integrating with mental health treatment. Well, if they're going to be serving a different population, you can still use the scale. You can still use the principles. You would just change the word mental health treatment team to the team of people that are serving that population.
Right, right. How do you validate somebody's score on the Fidelity scale? How do you oversee that?
So Gary Bond has done tremendous work in terms of validating Fidelity scales, and he helped to validate the 15-item IPS scale. And as we learned more, that's another thing about IPS, is that as we learn, we change things, we add things, and so we have the 25-item scale that he validated. So what that means is that the higher your score, the better your score on the scale, the total scale score, the better employment outcomes that you're going to have, is what he found.
Okay. And is it a self-assessment?
No. We don't self-assess very well. And we have found that some sites will think they're doing fabulous, where outside objective reviewers would not agree with that. Or we've had sites that have tried these self-assessments that are just really hard on themselves, and that doesn't work either. So we try to train sites and states to have trained Fidelity reviewers who can objectively come in and score. They visit a site for a day and a half to 2 days to look at activities and documentation that's used to score the 25 items. Now, not all states may have enough Fidelity reviewers, so it may be that somebody in QA or within a large agency could be trained. We recommend having 2 Fidelity reviewers for a review.
Okay. Now, one thing I was surprised about is, so my program, we wanted to go off Fidelity a little bit. So part of the Fidelity is that one person does all the services for an individual. So it's not, nobody's handing off for different times. And my program wanted to try having a job developer, a standalone job developer. That's all they're going to do is go out into the community and job develop. And so I wrote you guys, and you gave us permission. You said, yeah, okay, give it a try. Give it a try. Of course, it would impact our Fidelity score, but you didn't say, no, Nave, don't do that. But lo and behold, a year later, we were like, yeah, I shouldn't have tried that. I should have just listened to what the Fidelity said. But that brings us to job development, because I will tell you, and I don't know if you're aware of this. So you have a very specific model of how to job develop. And that is a huge game changer. So it has nothing to do with the population. So I currently work with individuals with an intellectual and developmental disability. So I have used, it's called 3 Cups of Tea. I'm going to let you talk about it. I have trained 3 Cups of Tea to our providers with that population across the state. And it is hands down the training that they were like, this changed my professional life. It's because there are no other methods. There's like suggestions but you have a very specific, do A, B, you have a book that goes with it. So can you tell us a little bit about, one, the method very briefly, and then how you even came up with it?
Yeah. Well, actually, we need to give credit to Sarah Swanson, because she used that name, 3 Cups of Tea, and outlined the method. And the thinking of 3 Cups of Tea is that it takes really 3 cups of tea to get to know somebody and have a relationship. And the idea behind this method is that networking and getting to know employers and what they're looking for in who they hire is key. Many jobs are not advertised, so going to the want ads or online, you're not going to, one, develop that relationship with the employer, and know really what's out there. So, 3 cups of tea. The first cup of tea is IPS specialists will go ask a hiring manager or an employer if they could meet with them for 15, 20 minutes to learn more about the business, the kinds of people that they hire, who does well there, and not even ask for jobs. I mean, we tell people don't ask for a job, because
Right.
if you ask for a job and they say, well, we don't have any, then that ends the conversation. So the second cup of tea is when you have that 15, 20 minute conversation with a hiring manager and start getting them talking about their business and their hiring practices and what are the different jobs that they have in the business. And so it's all about learning. It's all about getting the employer talking and excited. And then the third cup of tea and fourth and fifth are just continuing that relationship. And the the IPS specialist is thinking all along. They have somebody in mind, which is why they went to that employer in the first place. And they may decide, you know what, this is not the spot for Peter.
Hmm.
And that's fine. They may continue to groom that relationship with the employer because there may be somebody else who's going to come along who has the same kinds of interests and skills. Um, but I think what happens is that people, they're kind of scared about job development because they don't know what to say. They don't
Hmm.
have the questions. They don't have an introductory statement. And so this method tries to give people the tools so they can feel confident, and people get more confident the more they do it. And
Hmm.
so if you just have that lone job developer, the other people are going to say, "Ooh, glad I don't have to do that." But, they're going to miss out on all those jobs.
Right. It's so really it's based on psychology. When I train it, I tell people, this can be used for anything you will ever ask for. And I give the example. So, I had a mentor, and the first time I met with him to say, will you be my mentor? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. And the second time we got coffee, ironically,
Hmm.
and we just sat down and talked about our professional paths up to that point and kind of got to know each other better. And then the third time we met, and I am not making this up at all. The third time we met, we're in his office and he's like, so what are some projects you're working on? And and I told him, and he goes, what can I do to help you? Right. And so
Hmm.
and that's that moment, that third time that somebody meets you, that they feel like, I know you, I trust you.
Hmm.
What can I do for you? Or how
Hmm.
can I help you? If I had asked him for help the first time I met, he would have been like, who are you and why are you talking to me?
Hmm.
Right.
Right,
And so I
right,
was like, that's 3 cups of tea right there. So
right.
it's something that can be used in our day to day life as well.
That's a great
Um,
example.
um, so you had mentioned previously education and IPS. How does education fit in if somebody wants to go to trade school or go to college or?
Yeah. When we first developed IPS, we focused on employment, but then over time, clearly education is a part of it, and it's more likely a part for younger people, right? And so that's what their peers are doing as well. And so education needs to be a part of IPS. And we're doing a study now of young adults, and we've gotten to know a lot of programs that serve young adults, and we find that many of these people are going to school and have a job. And so education, we know that people, the more education they have, the better their salary is going to be and their life. And so we want people to graduate from high school. We need IPS specialists talking to people about that. And then going forward, training schools, certificate programs. They're all ways that people can move ahead in their careers, and we want IPS specialists to offer options to people. And so education really is extremely important, and I'm glad it's clearly now so much a part of IPS, more so than we started, back in the 1990s.
Hmm. And do you find that young adults are very different from older adults in this population? And
Well,
outcomes or goals or anything like that?
yeah, I think they sometimes change their minds a lot.
More frequently?
One day they want to do this, the next day they want to do that, and they've got their social life, and they're not easily contacted by a telephone. We know we got to be texting these young people, and we need to be interested in what's going on in their life for engaging young people. But they do want to work and they want to go to school, and they are doing those things.
Hmm.
So I think the education piece, we haven't had a good track record of research on that. And it's hard to, what is the outcome that we're measuring? Completion, of a whole program, or is it of a course? We're trying to think about that more, but we do have a Fidelity scale we developed it for young adults. And so it has a component now for supported education. It's up on our website, if people want to see that, ipsworks.org. And so hopefully that will help people. And we also have a manual that we wrote a couple of years ago about helping young adults, but there's a big focus in that manual on education.
Awesome.
Anybody can go back to school. I mean, you don't have to be a young adult to do that, but
Right.
we know those people are focused on that.
Hmm. Yeah, we talk about changing times. I mean, when you think of, I'm almost 50. When you think of people my age and older, families, I think, didn't have a lot of expectations. It was common to put people in day treatment programs where they went all the time. But this younger population, them and their families, have much higher expectations.
Right, right.
So,
Thank goodness.
yes, thank goodness. Um, can you talk to me a little bit about the Learning Collaborative? What does that mean and who belongs to it?
Okay, so it was initially the IPS Learning Community, but now it's the International IPS Learning Community that currently includes 24 states in this country and 6 other countries. This got started decades ago, actually, through a philanthropic gift of Johnson and Johnson, and that's very separate from their companies and their pharmacies and pharmaceutical companies. But they had never given before to anything in mental health, and decided through the recommendation of the National Alliance on Mental Illness and NIMH that they should come talk to us. And they did, and they asked us to demonstrate that IPS is going to help people. So we did a small demonstration in 3 states, Connecticut, Vermont, and South Carolina. They had good outcomes. We made a video. And so they funded us through 2000 and I think it was 14. They funded us for 15 years. And then and so what we did was they said, you figure out what you want to do, and we will provide the money for that. And so we wanted a model that was going to help expand IPS across our country, as well as sustain the program. So we gave incentive money to states, just a few at a time, and we helped them with training. We help them figure out what's the infrastructure to make this happen in your state. So we did that with Tennessee, right?
Hmm.
And you developed a state IPS team, and we asked that you have a partnership between the state mental health authority and state vocational rehabilitation. That was very intentional because we felt that that was a way to launch this and sustain it over time. That their funding sources, but also, you know, vocational rehabilitation. They know about jobs in the world of work. That's what they do. They also know about a lot of different kinds of disabilities. So people with mental illness may have other illnesses going on. So it's good to have that expertise. And then they help with planning, and they also have resources that people may need for supplies at work, tools, uniforms, those kinds of things. So these two systems partner together to identify local sites, 3 to 6, and have a trainer. They provide training. They collect simple outcomes that are part of the learning community. It's up on our website. You can see the U.S. outcomes, and we make sure that Fidelity reviews are conducted, and it just has continued to expand. A number of years ago, Johnson and Johnson said, "Well, we have companies all over the world, so let's go international with this." And so that's when we then Italy, Spain, and the Netherlands came on board, but we also have New Zealand and in Canada, and so parts of Montreal. We've tried to keep expanding it. It's a big network, and I guess in my career, that's what I'm most proud of, that I've been able to um, help people communicate with each other and move forward through that vehicle.
I have to, I don't know, I don't have to, but I'm going to pause and let you know how much IPS impacted my professional career. One, it opened my mind to my own biases and things like that, because like I said, the zero exclusion challenge, I think the first time you hear it like that challenges everybody. And then the other part was, part of your Fidelity scale is having a variety of jobs. And I found that, like most teams, I think before they start something like IPS, we tend to funnel people into employers that are friendly to hiring individuals with disabilities. And you actually get scored low if you have too many people working at one place. So at the our program usually placed, I don't know, between 40 and 55 people a year. And at the end of the year, we have a banquet, and on the back of our program, we would have all the employers where our members were working. And when I first started, we had, I don't know, 8, 10 employers, and then a couple years into doing IPS, we would have like 35 employers. And it's just a symbol of we were unknowingly not being person centered, right? Because not everybody didn't want to work at those same, big employers. So that really impacted me, working with you guys. So anyway, it's just, I get nostalgic. I miss IPS. I don't work with it much, although I'm still in contact with it in some ways. You guys also seem to have, and I don't know if you're aware of why, but you have a pretty strong relationship with SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. A lot of their grants require IPS as a component. I was wondering, did they approach you, or how did that happen?
How did that happen? I'm not exactly sure how that did happen. I mean, we've worked with people from SAMHSA, and they, we have an annual meeting, and so I think they became educated about it and saw that that IPS has good outcomes, and that this is, work is what people really want, and
Mm-hmm.
it helps with their recovery. And so I think that many people at SAMHSA saw that and wanted to promote it, which has been extremely helpful for states.
Yes, because it gives additional funding for IPS programs or just staff people. Do you have any new strategies? Are you still evolving?
I'd like to think we're still evolving. I think that's an important part of our center, that we're always trying to learn from our research. I mentioned that we have just started a study for IPS for young adults. We're going to learn what works there, how much is different than serving older individuals. We were currently in the midst of a Social Security demonstration called the Supported Employment Demonstration, and that's serving people who had an initial denial for a Social Security application for an alleged mental illness. And so we're dealing with a different population, really, and learning about that population. So we're always learning. I think we're expanding the populations that are using IPS and are part of studying those different populations. So I hope we are always continuing to learn and will modify and expand things as we do.
And that is the end of the formal part. And now I'm going to ask you some personal questions. I always end with a few personal questions.
Okay.
The first, have you had mentors? I mentioned one earlier. I just have always strongly believed in mentors. Did you have any, even like going back to high school, college?
Oh boy. Well, there are people that I looked up to. My father was one. He was a internist, a physician. He was a hard worker and dedicated to helping people. And I seem to have inherited some of those genes, I think. And then in graduate school, there were professors that I admired. And then really my long-term mentor and colleague as well as partner, Bob Drake, had high expectations for me. And so I don't think I would have been able to do all the things that I have been able to do over time without his encouragement and support. So he, I guess, filled a lot of shoes for me.
Yeah. You mentioned how we all tend to change jobs or change our minds over years. When you were starting school, did you think you would be working in this field or working with research? Was that always your intent?
No. In college, I studied English and history. Then I graduated and thought, now what am I going to do? And I went and I waitressed it lasted a month. That was as long as it went.
Uh-huh.
I can remember serving the person French onion soup that was cold. I had forgotten to microwave it. It was not a good scene. So I stopped that and then I got a job working at a state institution for people who have mental retardation. And then I realized I needed to go back to school to do something other than that. And a friend of mine had gone into a program for rehabilitation counseling. And at the time, it was only 1 year. And I thought, that's perfect. I want to get through. And because I guess I've always been one to learn through doing and working. And so that's how it all evolved. I used to like to keep track of data and numbers when I was an employment specialist, but maybe that gently led me toward working at the research center. But it's been a good fit for me.
Good. Well, we're glad you landed there. That's for sure. And the last one, do you have any pets?
I do. I have 2 dogs. Oslo, who you can see on our website under staffing. He comes to work with me every day. His brother stays at home because his brother is grumpy and we're not supposed to leave them alone together. So, but Oslo brightens many lives in this office, I think. So we have fun with him.
Yes. Before we started taping, I told you I saw on the website that he's like a research assistant in training or some title you've given. Right. It's like he's not just on the website, but he has a title. So
well, I didn't do that. I have to tell you, somebody else put that up there.
For more information on individual placement support, please visit their website at ipsworks.org. That's ipsworks, one word, .org. Make sure to follow the podcast on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube under The Landscape Podcast. If you'd like to leave a comment or suggestion, please email us at comments@thelandscapepodcast.com. And finally, subscribe to the podcast through iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave a review. See you next time.